Hi everyone, this is Sean with MyWorks. Today we're talking a little bit more about using MyWorks Sync in scenarios where we're using a payment method in WooCommerce where the payment is actually happening after the order has been checked out. And what I mean by that is most payment methods in WooCommerce and most of our users will have payment happen at checkout. Meaning that, if I come and place an order on your site, as I reach that checkout page, I'm going to have options to pay, be it PayPal, Stripe, whatever those options may be. Typically speaking, then the order is taken and the payment is made at checkout. And really all that's left to do is to ship that order off to the person. With a non-immediate payment method, I'm talking more about your cash-on-delivery gateways, check, bank transfer, wire transfer, ACH or EFT, depending on where you are, any kind of COD, any kind of gateway where the order may take place before the payment is actually made. So typically speaking, if I do have one of these non-immediate payment methods, the first thing I'm going to want to do with MyWorks is to come to our settings menu here on the left under the MyWorks app. And then what I will do is I'll go to this order tab over here in the top right. And this very first order governs how our sync will usually sync WooCommerce orders to QuickBooks. By default, you'll find this set as sales receipt. And really, typically speaking, our advice around this in terms of how you want your orders to sync to QuickBooks is that if you're accustomed to invoices in QuickBooks, to use MyWorks to sync invoices. If you're accustomed to sales receipts, to use MyWorks to sync sales receipts. In the case of a non-immediate gateway, if we were to sync that WooCommerce order to QuickBooks as a sales receipt, that sales receipt is going to just reflect as paid because a receipt implies payment took place. So maybe not the best transaction type to use in a scenario where we're accepting orders without payment as yet. The payment will happen later on. So in this particular case, there's two things we can do. We can either set this to invoice here, which means regardless of how payment is made, whether it's through my non-immediate gateways, like COD or bank transfer, for example, or whether it's through a Stripe gateway, a credit card gateway, for example, PayPal, for example, all those orders will sync to QuickBooks as an invoice. The ones where payment did happen at checkout, like Stripe and PayPal, those will include the payment, which will then show that invoice up as paid on the QuickBooks end. Those that didn't have payment take place, like COD or bank transfer, those orders will just sync to QuickBooks as an open invoice, and you can receive payment how you typically would in that workflow if you weren't using our sync. The other option to us here for this first setting would be to set it up to sync on a per gateway level. And what that means is that on the per payment gateway level, we can decide to how we want those transactions to sync. Meaning that I could have my Stripe and PayPal orders sync through to QuickBooks as sales receipts because the payment did take place at checkout. And then I could have my COD or my bank transfer sync across to QuickBooks as an invoice, and therefore those will still show as payment being due. So if I were to select this per gateway, I can show you what that would look like. This feature, by the way, is only available on MyWorks Sync paid plans. So if you're using our free launch plan, you would want to set this to invoice. If I have it set to per gateway here, I would save here in the bottom left just to lock in my settings options. Awesome. And now we'll hop over to my map tab over here on the left. Mapping just refers to how I want data to flow between WooCommerce and QuickBooks. And from our various options here in the top right, I'll select payment method. There we go. Okay, so this map payment methods page is quite literally just a list of any payment methods I have active here in WooCommerce. And I can show you specifically what I mean if I hop into my WooCommerce settings and I go to payments. You can see here that my 3 active payment methods are COD. Oops, sorry about that. Our COD over here. Let's make it a bit bigger. COD over here. PayPal over here is active and Stripe over here, and nothing else is active. And if we hop back into this map page, we're seeing those same 3 gateways that we have active, right? COD, PayPal over here, and then Stripe here at the bottom. And so if I get to this map payment methods page and there is no payment method showing up in this list, that just means that I just have to hop into my WooCommerce settings and at least activate one in order to be able to map it. So for my two paid gateways, these are probably slightly easier. You can see firstly that here we have that same setting that we set to a per gateway level earlier, WooCommerce order sync as. And so that means that here on a per payment gateway level, I can now decide how I want my orders to sync. And I can have them set for sales receipt where payment is taking place at checkout, like Stripe and PayPal. And I can have it set for invoice for COD, because there payment will happen after checkout once the order gets delivered. And in that case, I want the order to sync to QuickBooks as an open invoice to not reflect as paid if it hasn't been paid yet. Cool. So for all of our payment methods, what we'd want to do is we'd want to set a QuickBooks Online payment method, which is going to describe this payment if we were to sync it to QuickBooks. That obviously wouldn't happen in the case of COD because no payment took place at checkout, so our sync simply wouldn't sync a payment. But in the case of PayPal or of Stripe, that would happen. And so if we were to sync a PayPal order, would be described in this case in QuickBooks as card. These payment methods, by the way, if I hop into my QuickBooks, I can go to settings, I can go to all lists over here, and I can go to payment methods, and you'll notice those payment methods are the same as the ones that we were seeing in this drop down. So I can set a new one here. I set a new one here as well. And just like that. Awesome. Okay, cool. So typically speaking, the bank account is we'll go to the actual bank account where this payment is taking place. So in the case of PayPal, we'd usually recommend you just have your PayPal account connected to QuickBooks, in which case PayPal as a bank account would show up in this list and I'd select that one. In the case of Stripe, it would be whichever account Stripe actually pays you, right? So for my COD gateway, I have them set up to sync as invoices, and my bank accounts are all set, so I'll save here to see my new payment methods. Awesome. And if I hit my drop down now, I should be seeing my new payment methods that I just created in QuickBooks. I'll save those. Even though payment hasn't taken place, yeah, we can adjust this one to maybe say check, because that would be most accurate with COD. Not that any payment would sync, so it really shouldn't matter how we have that one set. Okay, so now that that's all gone through, some of the more advanced options for my non-immediate gateway here inside of this map payment methods tab would be that I could set a term mapping for this gateway, i.e. if somebody checks out through this gateway and I wanted them to be net 30 in QuickBooks, I could have that set here. And then the invoice due date delay, if I hop back over into QuickBooks and I go to invoices and I create an invoice, here we go. You notice this due date, so that's what this due date delay over here in our settings is referring to. So if I knew that I was net 30 and I wanted to set the invoice due date plus 30 days, I'd be able to do that over here, and so that way that invoice will only show as past due once that net 30 period is up. This setting over here is very rarely used, but it is for scenarios where I am using a non-immediate gateway here inside of WooCommerce. And basically, if I set any of my order statuses here, for example, completed, that would be telling me that, if I then come into WooCommerce and I take one of my COD orders and I convert them to completed, that would be the trigger for our sync to automatically sync a payment through to QuickBooks. This setting, or at least this option here, would probably not be used alongside this setting that we have inside of our automatic sync settings over here, but would be doing the same thing, I guess, in the opposite direction. So over here in our automatic sync settings of MyWorks Sync, you'll notice we have this QuickBooks Online to WooCommerce section, and we have this payment switch here at the bottom. And what that means is if I sync my order to QuickBooks as an open invoice, and then once the person does pay, I go into QuickBooks and I receive a payment against the invoice like I normally manually would. That would then update that WooCommerce order to reflect to the order status of completed by default, but we can actually control specifically which status we want that to update to here inside of MyWorks Sync settings pool. And so it would usually be one of the other, right? We would either want to come into WooCommerce, complete that WooCommerce order, and have MyWorks sync an artificial payment to reflect that invoice is paid in QuickBooks, or we would want to receive payment on the invoice in QuickBooks, have our setting enabled here under MyWorks Sync settings, automatic sync, to have payments flow in the direction QuickBooks to WooCommerce, and that way when I receive that payment against the invoice in QuickBooks, that order status in WooCommerce will automatically update to completed. You don't need to use either of these, by the way. If you're quite happy, say your COD orders in WooCommerce reach a status of pending payment when they're checked out, and you're quite happy that those orders in WooCommerce just stay at pending payment regardless of what happens in the QuickBooks workflow, then there's really no need to have the switch turned on, and there's really no need to adjust the order status in WooCommerce. All that would happen is those orders would stay as on hold in WooCommerce, or pending payment rather, and on the QuickBooks end, once payment is received on that invoice, the invoice would just reflect as paid, which is what you wanted to happen anyway. In terms of those order statuses, sometimes order statuses for non-immediate gateways will not be one of the default order statuses that will trigger automatic syncing with our sync. And what I mean by that is if I go back to my settings menu and then to order, and I scroll on down here to automatically sync orders when they reach any of these statuses, these are the order status triggers for automatic syncing of WooCommerce orders with MyWorks Sync. Why is it processing and completed by default? Well, the reason for that is that those are the two order statuses here in WooCommerce where, usually speaking, an order has been successfully placed and paid. Processing would be any order paid via credit card gateway like Stripe. Completed would be any order paid through any other means like PayPal, for example. So if I knew that my COD orders, once they're placed, they reach a status of pending payment, and I wanted those orders to automatically be triggered for syncing with QuickBooks, I would just add pending payment here as a status to have orders automatically sync with QuickBooks. If I didn't want those orders to automatically sync, there was some other part of my workflow here in WooCommerce that I wanted to achieve first, I would leave that order status off, and I would just be able to manually push those orders, either from clicking directly into the order from my WooCommerce orders page, or here under this push menu. I could go to orders and I could select specifically which orders I wanted to sync with QuickBooks. I will attach the document for handling non-immediate payment methods to this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, you can always check in with our sales team at myworks.software. You can open a live chat with us. We're live Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 Central. If it's outside of those hours or you needed more specific support help, our support's email address is support@myworks.software. Have a great day.